She was 12 years old. She had saved for 11 weeks. 11 weeks of skipping chocolate milk at lunch. 11 weeks of walking past the corner cart without stopping. All for one notebook. A gold spiral notebook she had seen in a store window and decided, with the quiet determination of a child who understands the value of earning something, that she was going to have. She walked into that store with her pink backpack, her red bow, and every dollar she had saved. And before she could even take the notebook from the shelf, before she had approached a single register, before she had placed one item in her bag, the manager crossed the floor. Not toward the woman loading her tote, not toward the man in the heavy coat moving through the back aisle, toward her, the black girl. "We're going to need to check your bag." And she stood there, this 12-year-old child, and she opened her backpack in the middle of that store in front of everyone and removed her math notebook, her pencil case, her sandwich, and a photograph of her mother. There was nothing inside. There was never going to be anything inside. But what no one in that store knew, what the manager could not have imagined when he crossed that floor with his arms folded and his decision already made, was that 12 feet away, in a charcoal suit, with tattoos rising above his collar and 22 years of silent, absolute power behind his eyes, a Korean Mafia boss was watching every single second of it. And he had already decided what was going to happen next. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a member and help our channel. There is a kind of silence that precedes a storm. Not the dramatic silence of held breath and tightened fists, but the ordinary silence of a Tuesday afternoon. The kind where the lights hum at a steady frequency, where shelves are perfectly aligned, where nothing appears to be wrong because nothing has gone wrong yet. The bright shelf occupied the ground floor of a commercial building on West 34th Street, the kind of store that smelled like fresh paper and new beginnings. Colored pencils lined up in their boxes like soldiers. Notebooks stacked in careful towers. A place meant for curiosity, for creativity, for the young. Aisha Campbell had been saving for 11 weeks. She knew the exact number because she had written it down. 11 small marks on the inside cover of her math notebook. One for each week she had declined the chocolate milk at lunch. One for each Saturday she had walked past the corner cart without stopping. 12 years old and already fluent in the discipline of wanting something so much that you protect the wanting like it is something fragile. She pushed open the glass door at 3:47 in the afternoon, her pink backpack bouncing against her shoulders, the red bow in her hair slightly askew from the wind outside. She did not rush. She walked the way people walk when they have earned the right to be somewhere. Slowly, looking at everything, letting herself enjoy the arrival. The gold spiral notebook was on the third shelf from the left, exactly where she remembered it. She reached out and touched the cover. And that was when Derek Walsh crossed the floor. He moved with the particular confidence of a man who had decided something before he had evidence for it. 38 years old, assistant manager for 6 years. A man who had learned to read a room the way certain people learn to read rooms. Not for what was there, but for what made him uncomfortable. He straightened his navy polo as he walked. He kept his voice measured, almost polite. "Excuse me, miss. We're going to need to check your bag before you leave." Aisha turned. Her hand was still on the notebook she had not yet taken from the shelf. "I haven't bought anything yet," she said. "It's store policy." She looked past him. A woman near the registers was loading a tote bag with items she hadn't paid for yet. A man in a heavy coat was moving toward the back aisle without a basket. Neither of them had been stopped. Neither of them had been watched. Only her. There is a specific weight that settles on a child in a moment like this. Not confusion, exactly, and not yet the full understanding of what is happening, but something in between. A quiet unraveling. The sense that the room has shifted in a way she cannot name but can absolutely feel. She lowered her hand from the notebook. She unzipped the backpack. And Junho Baek, who had been standing 12 feet away examining a set of Japanese watercolors, went completely still. He had not come to this store looking for anything beyond a small gift. He had not come looking for a reason. But there are moments that find you regardless. Moments that land in front of a man and demand that he decide, in the space of a breath, who he actually is beneath the titles and the silence and the careful years of saying nothing unless saying something was absolutely necessary. He watched the girl's shoulders drop. He set down the watercolors. There is a particular kind of man who has learned that the loudest person in a room is rarely the most dangerous one. Junho Baek had spent 22 years building that understanding into something close to an art form. He had sat across tables from men who screamed, and men who wept, and men who made promises with the theatrical conviction of actors who had forgotten they were acting. None of them had frightened him. What frightened him, the only thing, if he was being precise about it, was a world that moved against the small and the quiet without anyone in the room finding it remarkable enough to interrupt. He watched Derek Walsh stand over a 12-year-old girl while she removed her belongings one by one and placed them on the edge of a display shelf. A math notebook, a pencil case, a sandwich wrapped in foil, a photograph, small, creased at the corner, of a woman in scrubs smiling at the camera. Her mother, he understood, without needing to be told. Derek examined each item with the practiced neutrality of a man performing thoroughness. He turned the pencil case over. He looked inside the sandwich bag. He did not find anything because there was nothing to find. And when he was finished, he stepped back and said, with the tone of someone concluding a reasonable and necessary procedure, "All good. You can go." As though he had done her a courtesy. As though the past 4 minutes had been something she should be grateful to have survived. Aisha repacked her bag in silence. Her jaw was set in the way that children set their jaws when they have decided that crying in public is not something they are willing to do. She moved carefully, folding the foil back around the sandwich, tucking the photograph flat against the inside pocket. She did not look at Derek. She did not look at the notebook still sitting on the shelf. The notebook she had saved 11 weeks for. The one she had come here specifically to buy. She began walking toward the door. And Junho said, quietly, "Wait." The word did not carry volume. It did not need to. There was something in the register of it, a frequency just below the surface of the syllable, that made Derek Walsh turn before he had consciously decided to turn. The way a man turns when he hears something that his instincts recognize before his mind catches up. Junho was already looking at him. Not with anger. Not with the wide-eyed performance of outrage that Derek had learned over the years to manage, to redirect, to outlast. This was something considerably more difficult to manage. This was the expression of a man who had already made a decision and was simply waiting for the formalities to conclude. "Get me the owner of this store," Junho said. "Now." Derek almost smiled, Almost. The smile was a reflex. The particular reflex of a man who had learned that projecting calm authority in the face of customer complaints was the fastest way to end them. "Sir, if you have a concern, there's a— I won't repeat myself." 4 words, delivered at the same volume as the first sentence, which was to say, almost no volume at all. Derek looked at him. He took in the charcoal suit, the white collar open at the throat, the Rolex catching the store's overhead light in a single, quiet flash. He looked, and this was the detail that moved through him like cold water, at the edge of the tattoo visible just above the collar line. The dark ink of it, the deliberateness of a man who had chosen to mark himself somewhere that could not be hidden by a shirt. He picked up the phone behind the register. Aisha had stopped near the door. She was watching. She had the stillness of a child who has learned that when adults begin to move in unexpected directions, the wisest thing is to become very small and very quiet and wait to understand what is happening. Junho did not look at her yet. He stood where he was, hands folded at his front, and waited for the owner to come down from the office above the store. The office with the monitors, where a man named Richard Harmon had, in all likelihood, been watching the floor camera for the last several minutes and had chosen, as he had chosen before, to find nothing worth interrupting. That calculation, Junho understood, was about to change. The door at the back of the store opened. Richard Harmon was 61, with the complexion of a man who had spent decades under fluorescent light and the eyes of someone accustomed to reading situations for their cost. He came down the 3 steps from the back hallway and crossed the floor with the measured pace of a man preparing to de-escalate. He did not yet know that there was nothing left to escalate. Junho waited until Harmon was close enough to speak to without raising his voice, which was to say 3 feet. And then he said, "Walk with me." There is a back corner of every retail store that exists for the same purpose. A place where difficult conversations go to die quietly, away from the shelves and the customers and the soft commercial music that keeps everyone moving forward. Richard Harmon knew this corner well. He had used it before, for returns that became arguments, for employees who needed to be let go, for the occasional customer who had crossed from upset into something that required a door between them and the rest of the floor. He had never used it for anything like this. Junho stood near the wall, his back to the shelves of surplus stock, and let the silence settle for exactly 3 seconds before he spoke. He had learned, over many years and many rooms, that 3 seconds of silence before a conversation begins does something irreversible to the person waiting for it to start. It tells them, without a single word, that the man across from them is not in a hurry. And a man who is not in a hurry is a man who already knows how this ends. "You have a commercial lease," Junho said. "Building management. The property group that holds this block." It was not a question. Harmon's expression shifted in the way that expressions shift when a conversation moves faster than expected toward something the listener had hoped would not be mentioned. Yes. Standard commercial terms. We renew every— Park Avenue Capital Holdings," Junho said. "You renewed 14 months ago. Favorable rate. Below market, actually." Harmon said nothing. "I have a controlling interest in Park Avenue Capital," Junho continued, in the same tone a man might use to explain a bus schedule. "I also hold a silent equity position in the retail management group that operates this building's commercial tenants. This is documented. It is not a secret. It is simply information that most people in your position have never had a reason to look for." The overhead light in the storage room hummed at a frequency that suddenly seemed very loud. "What happened on that floor?" Junho said. was witnessed by me. Personally. He paused. The girl had not taken anything. She had not approached the register. She had touched one item on a shelf and had not yet moved toward the exit. There was no protocol. There was no policy. There was a decision made about her specifically, in the presence of other customers who were not stopped, who were not watched, who were not asked to open anything. Harmon opened his mouth. "I am not finished," Junho said. Harmon closed it. "You have 2 things to do before this store closes today." Junho reached into the interior pocket of his jacket and removed a card. Plain, cream-colored, nothing printed on it except a handwritten number. He placed it on the shelf beside him without looking at it. "The first is a personnel decision. I don't need to tell you which one. The second is a donation. The arts program at the public school 3 blocks east of here. The number on that card is the amount, not a suggestion." Harmon looked at the card. His face had moved through several emotions in quick succession and had arrived, finally, at the one that tends to appear when a man realizes that the ground he believed was solid has been, for some time, owned by someone else. "And if he began. "Then I begin a lease review," Junho said simply. "Standard process. These things take time, of course. Months, sometimes. During which your renewal terms would revert to current market rates." He let that land. "You would still have a store. It would simply cost considerably more to keep it." He picked up the card and held it out. Harmon took it. Junho walked back through the door without checking whether the man behind him was still standing. He already knew he was. On the floor, Aisha was sitting on a low bench near the entrance, her backpack in her lap, watching the door to the back hallway with the patient, careful attention of someone who does not yet know what they are waiting for, but has decided to wait anyway. When Junho emerged, she stood instinctively, not out of recognition, but out of some quieter instinct, the kind children have before the world teaches them to distrust it. He walked to the shelf where the gold spiral notebook still sat, and took it without hesitation. Then he took 3 others, different sizes, different colors, and carried all 4 to the counter without looking at Derek Walsh, who was standing behind the register with the expression of a man who had begun to understand the shape of what was coming, and could not yet find a way to step outside of it. He set the notebooks on the counter. "These are hers," he said. Derek rang them through in silence. Junho carried the bag to where Aisha was standing and held it out. She looked at it, then at him, with the particular wariness of someone who has already been surprised once today, and is not certain she has the capacity for a second surprise so quickly. "I can't accept things from strangers," she said. "My mom doesn't allow it." Something moved across Junho's face then. Brief, controlled, but real. The kind of movement that happens when a wound that has long since closed is pressed without warning. "Your mother raised you correctly," he said. He reached into his jacket again and produced his phone. "Would you like to call her?" Aisha looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. And while she dialed, Junho turned and looked back across the floor, at the shelves perfectly aligned, at the humming lights, at Derek Walsh, who had not moved from behind the register and was now looking at the middle distance with the expression of a man counting the minutes until a shift he would not finish. Outside, the afternoon was continuing without interruption. Taxis, pedestrians, the ordinary machinery of a city that did not know and would not know what had just happened inside one of its 10,000 stores. It did not need to know. Some corrections are not made for the record. They are made because a man walked into a store to buy a gift and instead found something that required him to be, for a few quiet minutes, exactly who he was. Aisha's mother arrived 17 minutes later. Her name was Christine Campbell, and she came through the glass door of the bright shelf the way mothers come through doors when they have received a phone call from a number they do not recognize, and a daughter who said only, "Come, Mom, it's okay, just come." Which is to say, she came quickly, and she came looking at everything at once. She found Aisha on the bench near the entrance, 4 notebooks in a paper bag beside her, a half-eaten sandwich on her lap, her red bow still slightly askew. Alive, unhurt, whole in every visible way. Christine crossed the floor and folded her daughter into her arms without speaking. The way parents hold children when the fear has not yet finished leaving the body, even though the mind already knows everything is fine. She held her for a long moment. Then she pulled back and looked at her face the way only mothers look, reading every millimeter for the thing that the child is not saying. "Tell me," Christine said. And Aisha told her. Quietly, carefully, in the precise and ordered way she told all stories, beginning to middle to end, leaving nothing out, including the part about the other customers who had not been stopped, including the part about the way the manager had handled her photograph, including the part about the man in the gray suit who had said, "Wait," in a voice that made everything stop. Christine listened without interrupting. When Aisha finished, her mother sat with it for a moment, with all of it, the full weight of it, in the way that Black mothers sit with the specific news that the world has once again introduced itself to their child ahead of schedule, in a way that could not be undone or unfiled or softened after the fact. She exhaled slowly. Then she looked up, across the store, to where Junho was standing near the watercolor sets he had never actually purchased, his back half-turned, his attention apparently on the display in front of him. Christine stood. She walked across the floor. She stopped 2 feet from him and waited until he turned, which he did, unhurried, as though he had been expecting it. "My daughter says you helped her," Christine said. "She handled herself," Junho replied. "I handled the paperwork." Christine looked at him steadily. She had the eyes of someone who had spent years in emergency rooms, learning to read situations with speed and accuracy, to see past the surface of things to what was actually happening underneath. She read him now the way she read everything. The suit, the stillness, the tattoo above the collar, the way he held himself like a man who had long since stopped needing anyone's approval to occupy a room. She did not ask who he was. She understood, with the particular intelligence of a woman who had navigated the world entirely on her own terms for 12 years, that some questions are less important than the answer already standing in front of you. "Thank you," she said. Junho nodded once. The slight, economical nod of a man who does not require elaboration and will not offer it. Christine returned to her daughter. She picked up the bag of notebooks and looked inside, then looked at Aisha, who explained about the savings and the 11 weeks, and the gold spiral one being the one she had come for specifically. Christine was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her own bag, found the amount, and walked to the register. Derek Walsh was no longer behind it, a younger employee, wide-eyed, moving with the particular carefulness of someone who had spent the last 30 minutes watching events they did not fully understand unfold around them, processed the payment without comment. Christine paid for the notebooks, all 4 of them, because the other 3 had been chosen by a stranger who had looked at her daughter and seen something worth protecting. And that, she had decided without needing to think about it very long, was worth honoring in the most ordinary and human way she knew how. They left together, mother and daughter, through the glass door and into the afternoon, the city resuming around them immediately and without ceremony. the way cities do, indifferent and enormous and utterly unaware that anything at all had shifted inside one of its 10,000 rooms. Behind them, on the floor of the bright shelf, a phone call was being made. Richard Harmon stood in the back hallway with the cream-colored card in one hand and his cell phone in the other, looking at a number that was not small for a school arts program 3 blocks east. His accountant would ask questions tomorrow. He would not have satisfying answers. He made the transfer anyway. Not because he had become a better man in the space of an afternoon. People do not become better men in the space of an afternoon. He made it because the alternative had been explained to him in a quiet room by a quiet man, and the math was the math. And Richard Harmon had spent 61 years understanding, above all else, the math. Derek Walsh was called into that same back room 20 minutes before closing. He came out 9 minutes later carrying a cardboard box. He did not say anything to anyone on his way out. There was nothing, really, to say. The events of the afternoon had a shape to them that resisted narration. Not a story he could tell with himself at the center of it in any way that served him. So he carried his box through the glass door and into the same afternoon that Aisha and Christine had walked into an hour before. The same city, the same indifferent sky. And he disappeared into it the way people disappear when a thing they did catches up to them before they were prepared to be caught. Junho left the bright shelf at 4:23, without the watercolors he had come for. He walked east on 34th Street, hands in his pockets, at the pace of a man with no particular urgency. He passed a school supply store, a pharmacy, a cart selling roasted nuts that sent a warm thread of smell across the cold air. He did not think about what had happened inside the store. Or rather, he thought about it only once, briefly, as he was crossing the intersection at 7th Avenue. He thought about a red bow, slightly askew from the wind, and a child who had told him, with complete seriousness, that her mother did not allow her to accept things from strangers. He had spent 22 years in rooms where power was measured in fear, where the question was never whether you could make someone comply, but only how quickly, how completely, how finally. He had won those rooms more times than he could count, and the winning had given him everything he had, and nothing he was willing to name in the quiet before sleep. This afternoon had been different. This afternoon, he had walked into a room and found something smaller than power, simpler than power, and had done the only thing that made sense, which was to put himself between it and the thing that was moving toward it. And a 12-year-old girl had looked at him and said, "My mom doesn't allow it," with the full dignity of someone who had been raised to know that self-respect was not something you suspended because a situation was difficult. He crossed the avenue. He did not look back. Some things do not require a conclusion. Some things simply require a witness. One person in the right place at the right moment who sees clearly, acts quietly, and then returns to their own life without needing the story to belong to them. The city moved around him, enormous and continuing. Somewhere 3 blocks east, a school arts program had, as of that afternoon, enough funding to run for the rest of the year. No one would know why. No one needed to. That 12-year-old girl didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't argue. She just stood there, spine straight, dignity intact, and opened her bag. And that quiet refusal to collapse, that was what changed everything. Because the most powerful thing a woman can carry is not anger. It's not even evidence. It's the kind of self-respect that doesn't need permission to exist. Maybe you're watching this today because something in you recognizes that scene. Not in a store, but in a relationship, in a pattern you stayed in too long, in the version of yourself that kept explaining, kept adjusting, kept hoping that this time the confusion would finally turn into something real. If you're a woman 45 or older and you're tired of mistaking intensity for devotion, tired of accepting crumbs and calling it love, tired of doubting what you clearly felt, there is a 30-day reset made specifically for you. Not to make you hard, to make you harder to manipulate. Scan the QR code on your screen right now, or find the link in the pinned comment below. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever walked into a room and felt, before a single word was spoken, that you had already been judged? Not for what you did, but simply for who you are. Have you ever witnessed a moment of quiet injustice and had to decide, in the space of a breath, whether you were the kind of person who looks away or the kind who says, wait? And think about this. The man who had all the visible power in that store ended the day with nothing, while the man who said the least held the most. Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, justice, and the kind of courage that never raises its voice, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click Join to become a part of our community and help the channel.